I don't know how many of you have ever witnessed that. How many of us will ever receive that? And so many of us don't deserve that. Why? Because we didn't dedicate ourselves like Brother Billy did. Now, right now, I want you all to do this. Clear your throats. Breathe. Smile. Look at somebody behind a mask and wink. Why? Because Billy would want that. For those of you in office, those of you on the force, those of you retired, those of you in the family, know, after watching that video display, that's what Billy do. Wow. Wink and smile. You know, he didn't have a great big smile, but that little tight smile that he had, to me, as I stood beside him, before him, behind him, and he stood beside me, behind me, and before me for 30 years, that was the signature that I knew everything was cool. That little smile. And those little beady eyes. When something was fixing to happen, and I'd turn back around if I could get past Charlie or Clancy or Chancy or somebody, and he'd pull that black hat on, he'd pull a hat on, and he was gone. The chief taught him that, but his method and methodology and his desire to be a servant to the Fort Worth Police Department, to be a servant and great employee to the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo, I'm going back to my first word. And I want you all to think about this and take this away today. Dedication. That was Billy. Dedicated. Dedicated to his family, to his fishing, to his travel. And as you saw in there, and it says, back the blue, he was dedicated to his profession. I don't think he could have been meant to be anything else. So at this time, if I may, in honor, I remember the first time I ever heard an obituary. I was 12 years old. That was a long time ago. And I wondered what it was really all about. Final words spoken over a friend, a family member who had passed. Billy E. Samuel, Jr. You know how important it is to be a junior? I guess my dad didn't want me to be one because he wasn't a Bobby. To be a junior, that's tight inside of a family deal. Also known to his family as Eddie. On the 11th day of January, went to be with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Fought hard for 3 weeks with this damned evil thing called COVID-19. I don't know about this thing. I've had it, you haven't. The mayor hugged me, he hasn't. My officers, we've had it. It's evil. Dang sure didn't come from the Lord. Billy decided that that was his passport to heaven, because I know that's where he is. He was born on the 20th day of December. He just had a birthday in 1952 in this great city of Fort Worth, Texas. To his parents, Billy and Cynthia Samuel. He was a devoted husband, a father, a brother, but his favorite title was, and you saw it in the videos, Pops to Hadley, to Kenley, and to Vance Jr. You know, those that live long enough to have grandkids know that they have arrived. And that's quite an arrival. Graduated from Fort Worth Police Academy in 1975. He was already a policeman when I came here a year later, one of the first people that I ever met. Advanced to rank of sergeant, working in multiple different divisions, until his retirement 34 years later. I don't know what y'all have done for 34 years as dedicated, but I'm using that word again. Dedicated policeman. Served as the vice president of the Police Officers Association for many years, where he fought hard to improve benefits, which we continue to fight for, and the working conditions for all officers. He served as the chairman of the board of the directors of the City of Fort Worth Retirement Fund, both while still working and also after retirement. He also served on the board of directors for the Texas Association of Public Employee Retirement Systems, and God bless them all, they deserve it. He began working at the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo, to many of us our home, in the late 1970s. And since 1985 has been in charge of security to ensure the safety of everyone attending this wonderful 23-day event. Of all of the loves, of which I honestly believe I never saw a moment or a bit of bitterness or hatred in Billy. He loved the outdoors. You could see it in our pictures that the family has chosen. He was the happiest when he was fishing, hunting, riding ATVs, camping with both of his family and friends. After retirement, he and Sue and family and friends traveled to many places throughout the world. Survived by his wife of 44 years, Mother Susan, James, Tracy will speak in a minute, husband to Vance, grandchildren, Hadley, Kenley, Vance Jr., brother Danny and his wife Jeannie, numerous aunts, uncles, cousins, and oh my God, many friends. We're at about nearly 200 people watching on the streaming video right now. So for those in the tens that are here today, for those of you out there, welcome to the life of Billy Samuel. He's preceded in death by his parents, Billy and Cynthia, and brother Stanley. Okay, as we progress for the afternoon in the next hour or so, nobody told me. Bonnie, you didn't tell me we had a time limit. So what we're going to do for Billy Samuel today is the same thing he did, will continue to do, and be in our thoughts of doing. Give us all the time that we need, and that's what we're going to give him, all the time. He'd say, no, I don't need it, but he deserves it. So this afternoon, and without introduction, we most all know each other. Yet to speak, Brother John Kerr, retired, of course, Fort Worth PD. Music, Sergeant Rick Van Houten, Tracy Barnett, Judy Kirkpatrick Young, former Fort Worth Mayor, the Honorable Mike Moncrief. And then we've got an open mic segment. And as you walked in, you might have seen them. There's two, one down here, one here, one way in the back. Whatever you might want to say. You want to introduce yourself or not be recognized. We'll have a moment for that, and we'll do it. And when we close today, I'm going to take it upon myself to reconnect you with Billy. Y'all ready for that? You're not going to get it You're not going to get a bill. You won't get a ticket from the Fort Worth PD. And it's everlasting. I think you'll like it. You may reconnect with some other people as well. So if we may begin, Brother John, the mic is yours.
Sue, James, Tracy, Vance, Hadley, Kinley, Vance Jr., family and friends, distinguished attendees, and fellow police officers. Billy Samuels was my friend. A fellow police officer of 34 years, he was a mentor to me, a close and trusted advisor and friend, and we all know he was a leader with patience and wisdom beyond his years. And Billy just liked to have fun. To work with Billy was not only an honor, but it was also a fun time. Billy could mix business with pleasure, and he made us all feel like we counted. Early in our careers, we worked together, and Billy's always exhibited the genuine passion for our job and for the city of Fort Worth. He practiced what he preached. Billy worked many different specialized divisions over his career, and that meant long and hard hours all the time. And there were also those part-time jobs that we all worked to make ends meet. And Billy had a massive work ethic. He worked as hard off duty as he did on duty, and that's what he expected from those of us who worked with him. But he could also put on a fun face and do things after the job was done that made us all, or made it a much more pleasurable event. Very early on in Billy's career, he became supervisor on the department, and I had the very good fortune to work under his supervision while we worked together at the traffic division. I found Billy to be one of the most patient people, man with a large amount of common sense, and he was a caring person who cared about his fellow workers. He led by example, and he always had the time to help a fellow employee, or anyone for that matter. Over the years, I've seen Billy Samuels help so many folks that I can't begin to count. I have seen Billy lend words of encouragement or a well-placed tidbit of that fatherly style advice. And many times I've personally witnessed Billy reach into his pocket and pull out a couple of $100 and hand it to an officer in need. And he only remarked, "Catch up with me when you can." I knew Billy in another light as well. He volunteered hundreds of hours as he served his fellow officers as an elected board member for the Fort Worth Police Officers Association. Billy was a devoted champion to the police labor movement, not only here in Fort Worth, but across the state of Texas. Billy's devotion to improving police officers' pay and working conditions are legendary throughout the state. Billy lobbied for positive changes for police officers both here in Fort Worth and across the state of Texas. And as we all know, Billy served not only the association, but he served as a trustee for the Fort Worth Employees Retirement Fund, where he eventually made chairman there. Billy tirelessly worked for his fellow police officers and his fellow employees, and was the instrument of so many improvements over the years. There's too many to list. But Billy had a passion for this job. He had a passion for his fellow workers. I had the good fortune to have Billy Samuels as my number one when I served 10 years as the president of the Fort Worth Police Officers Association. His patience and wisdom added to our success in so many different ways. Billy was always that glue that helped bind together 13 plus board members using his sound judgment, fatherly advice, and his ability to get us all on one page when every person in the room had their own opinion. Billy was my backup and support, and he also gave devoted advice and counsel to 5 other former Fort Worth Police Association presidents, all while working tirelessly behind the main battlefront, helping to convince the mayors of our city, council members, city managers and their staff, and fellow employee group leaders about the best way forward in the area of pay, benefits, and he always had the best interests of the citizens of this city at heart. I feel so blessed that the good Lord placed Billy Samuels in our domain because he showered us with an abundance of good things that Billy helped to bring about. Working closely with Billy, I can tell you he was especially proud of a few accomplishments of the very many that he did. First and foremost, Billy remarked about how blessed he felt and how proud he was of his wife, Sue, his children, Tracy and James, and I think he always talked about his grandkids. We all know that Billy probably picked our profession so he could follow in the footsteps of B.J. Kirkpatrick. In his professional life, Billy knew his fellow police officers were deeply challenged by this job at times, and he knew the value and the benefit of assistance and counseling. However, we all know that cops are very thin-skinned and they are very difficult to talk to at times. Billy and his good friend Paul Davis worked tirelessly to convince the city leaders and the police administration that a peer counseling service was needed in Fort Worth Police Department. And it was to be made up of police personnel within our ranks that were professionally supported by professionals that could mentor and help out those officers in times of need. That program was created in our police department, and it was largely through the efforts of Billy Samuels that we still have that program here today. Billy worked hundreds of hours behind the scenes helping to adopt better working conditions here in Fort Worth. One of the things that we worked on and spent a vast amount of time was perfecting the crime control and prevention district election that occurred back in the mid-90s. Both Billy and I had worked with city leaders, but Billy was the main front, or the guy who actually could talk with the best information and worked with our city leaders to convince them that the crime control prevention district could be a real opportunity for Fort Worth. That wasn't an easy task back in those days, because you got to think about how hard it is to talk an elected politician into supporting a tax increase of any kind. We all lobbied in the legislature in Austin to have the law changed so that it could be effective in Fort Worth. And then Billy and I and others worked very, very tirelessly to help the politicians pass that tax. Those funds have helped make Fort Worth a premier department throughout this country and still affects every single officer that comes to this department today. And as we all know, Billy had a passion to improve the Fort Worth pension benefits for all his fellow workers. He worked on every single improvement that I'm aware of since the mid-'80s. But a couple of the accomplishments that I know for a fact Billy was most proud of, first was the 25-year retirement for police officers. He knew that police officers needed to have a lower pension age and an opportunity to get out of this service and move on to other things. Another one of the major accomplishments that I think was almost single-handedly fulfilled by Billy Samuel, from tirelessly working and convincing the Fort Worth mayor and council of the day to provide for a greater number of elected employee representatives on the Fort Worth Pension Fund. This was accomplished during Mayor Ken Barr's tenure, and to date, it's been one of the largest beneficial changes in the pension fund to help improve the management of the Fort Worth Pension Fund, and it positively affected thousands of Fort Worth City employees and will continue to do so for times in the future. For well over 30 years as a police labor leader, Billy helped to accomplish so many positive things for his fellow officers. I can't begin to count them all. The entire time that I spent working with Billy was times of joy and fun, and I tell you, he affected us all in a very profound way. I'd like to close by acknowledging Billy's wife and family's sacrifice, because the time that Billy spent with us and working for us was time that he spent away from his family. And he spent that time away to help make our lives better. And for this, Billy has touched so many lives, and so many of us know that Billy will live in our hearts forever.
Even old dogs can learn new tricks. This is for you. Ricky, my friend. Isn't that amazing? John Kerr, thank you for your memories. Thanks for your service. Thanks for your time. And now, ladies and gentlemen, retired Fort Worth PD, Sergeant Rick Van Houten.
Thank you, Bob. And you did that amazing job wiping that down. And John, that is exactly why I didn't make a script, because you stole everything I would have scripted out anyway. Sue, Tracy, James, all of the immediate family, the extended family from around the world, brothers and sisters, that everyone around the world that is watching today, and I know we have a large virtual viewing audience. Crazy times we're in right now. But I'm honored to be here, and thank you for allowing me to share some thoughts on Billy Samuel. Larger than life, the man, the myth, the legend. I first met Billy, I'd only been on the police department a couple of years, and Billy was just one of those guys that glowed. He was a supervisor that you were attracted to. He was the supervisor everybody wanted to work for because he was just that guy. And early on got the pleasure of working with Billy, Pioneer Days, Chisholm Trail Days, Stock Show, just everything that John said. Billy worked hard. He was working on duty, off duty, whether it's through the POA, anything else, but he played hard too. He loved life. He loved his family. He loved his toys. He loved hunting. He loved fishing. He loved his friends. He just loved life. And that energy, that spark was very infectious. So what Billy did for me, and it's a common thread, I think, for everybody in here that really knew Billy, he was a friend, first and foremost, but he was a mentor. He was a leader. He was that person that you didn't realize at the time, but he was influencing almost every decision you made. I, too, like John, spent a long time as the president of the Fort Worth Police Officers Association. That would not have occurred had it not been for the mentorship and the advice and the urging of Billy and John. But Billy just had the biggest set of wings I think I've ever seen on a person, because simultaneously, while I was under that wing, so was every young Fort Worth police officer that's working the Stock Show, that ever works Chisholm Trail or Pioneer Days or worked for him in patrol or mounted or any of the other assignments he worked in. He was just that guy who could just enjoyed mentoring the young and helping them guide them through their career. You know, I was reflecting on Billy and looking back on how many things in my life he actually affected whether I was turning right or left. A lot of it wasn't done without seeking his counsel. And I'm so thankful for that. Billy, through the POA or through the retirement board or through Texpers or fighting for pension benefits for the future, those are all things I followed him through in, and he's got big shoes, and I'm doing my best to fill them. But I look around at all the new officers that Billy brought on a couple of years ago out here to the Stock Show. And each one of them, I sat back and watched, and I saw Billy go out of his way to not only make them feel welcome, because now they're working around a bunch of old heads that, like myself, that had been here and doing it for a while, but he really tried to teach them the old ways mixed with the new ways and how we do policing in Fort Worth, Texas. And that's what Billy did great, was just succession planning and mentoring the young. And in the end, he didn't expect anything from that. But what he got was a fierce following of loyal people, officers and others that he touched, that first and foremost would go out of their way and take care of each other as family, and creates just loyalty to, not just to Billy, but to the stock show, to Chisholm Trail, anything we were doing. If you didn't have that loyalty to it, then people didn't stay with it. But Billy made things, he made life fun. So I can't say enough about my friend, our friend. I do want to reiterate the sacrifice I know the family made. Billy was dedicated to so many things. It's truly hard to find that balance, and I know that affected a lot, but he talked about y'all all the time when he was around, away from you. It was always stories about the kiddos, the grandkids, just the entire family. He loved you guys more than anything. So in closing, I just want to steal something from the stock show. While the stock show may be legendary, Billy Samuel is legendary. Thank you all.
You don't have to worry about stealing that from the stock show. They stole it from somebody else. Did I say that? Well, I've said it many times. Yes, he is legendary. So is it. And I'm dang proud to say it. Tracy, Miss Judy, ladies, if you'd like this clean between, I'd be more than happy to. The mayor brought it up. I should do that. I'm looking at all of them. And I think we'll just do this in sequence as Tracy and Judy. We got 3. And we'll continue on. Thank you, ladies, for coming. Thank you for stepping up to speak. And bless you. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to try really hard to keep it together here. Promise, fingers crossed. Unfortunately, because of the times, our family from across the pond are not able to be here, so they've written a little something, and I volunteered to read it for them since I can't be here. As Billy's family in the UK, we have naturally devastated by Billy's passing, but doubly so because in the current pandemic situation, we cannot be there with you to join the thoroughly deserved tribute to a truly wonderful man. But we are there with you in spirit, watching the stream, participating in this celebration of life. Denise and Russ first met Billy in 1977 when he came over to the UK to marry Sue. He arrived, wedding suit over his arm, wearing his beloved cowboy boots, much to the fascination of us Brits. We didn't realize then that Texans wear cowboy boots all the time. We felt it was so courageous of him to make the trip on his own with no family able to be there. And Russ thought it was doubly courageous of him to be marrying his sister. But we all know what an amazing, loving, and lasting marriage it turned out to be. Sue's mom, Pat, loved Billy and spending time in Texas visiting him, Sue and her precious grandchildren. Billy was always so good to her. We made our first trip to Texas in 1979, and that was a real culture shock, never having been to the States before. In particular, it was most disconcerting to listen to Billy and Phil in conversation. We couldn't understand their heavy Texas accents. We remember Billy was horrified that we wanted to swim in the pool as early as April. He was also taken aback when Russ decided to take a walk down the street outside their apartment. Why walk when every shop and outlet has a car park or drive-through? Billy also took Russ out with him on night patrol, an eye-opening and memorable experience never to be forgotten, and one that left Russ with a lasting admiration of how the Fort Worth PD go about their often dangerous work. Denise said that if she had known what Russ was to witness, she would never have let him go. In the years since then, as our families were born and grew up, we've had several holidays in Texas, and Sue and Billy have come over to England many times. And in Texas, life is so different and great fun for us, so thanks to them. Billy has driven us all over the state and also across to New Mexico and Colorado. He was always so anxious to make sure we had a good time. Our kids got to do things they wouldn't have done at home: learning to shoot, water skiing, going to baseball games and the rodeo, driving the mower, and they all, Vicky, Chris, and more recently Hannah and Maddie, fell under Billy's spell. Sadly, he didn't get to meet baby Eloise, who would have loved him too. It soon became clear visiting all parts of Fort Worth that Billy seemed to know everyone and everyone knew Billy. And he also seemed to be able to fix anything: hotel rooms, tickets to the rodeo, and perhaps, unsurprisingly, talking his way through a police roadblock in San Antonio. And the whole time, Billy's police training meant that he was always aware of everything going on around us to ensure nothing happened to spoil our enjoyment. It was a long time, for example, before we realized that in restaurants, he always sat facing the door on permanent lookout. But there's one thing that cannot pass without mention. Our whole family has agreed that one of Billy's finest qualities was his ability to cook the best barbecue steaks on the planet. Billy always enjoyed his trips over the pond as well, especially if it meant getting away from the 100-degree temperatures in the summer. He liked to sit in our garden where it was a pleasant 60 to 70 degrees. Mind you, he disliked the miserable weather we often got. We remember sitting on the beach one day. It was chilly, with gray skies and mist rolling in, and he simply could not understand how we English folk could derive any pleasure from that. He loved our historical sites, grand mansions, and castles, many hundred years older than your log cabin village. But we feel the trip he most enjoyed was his last one, when he and Sue came over for Chris and Hannah's wedding in 2017. The night before, after a gathering of many of the guests for a meal, some of the guys carried on drinking until much later. It then became apparent that 3 of them were missing in a town in which none of them were familiar with: an Englishman, a German, and a certain Texan. Eventually, they were found in high spirits on the hotel roof terrace, a little worse for wear. Billy seemed a little quiet the following day. And so, after all our special experiences over the years, too many to fully list here, we are naturally heartbroken that Billy is no longer here to share in any more of them. I almost made it. We're almost done. We will miss your wisdom, your kindness, your sense of fun, your amazing hospitality, the twinkle in your eye, everything about you, in fact. We could not have wished for a better brother-in-law, uncle, and great-uncle. In this tribute, there are others we must not forget. They say that behind every great man is a great woman, and how true that is here. Sue has been a tower of strength and Billy's rock throughout their marriage, as he was hers. Promise there's only a couple sentences left. Together, they built the foundations for a happy family life. Billy was a wonderful husband, dad, father-in-law, and very special pops. We are so desperately sorry for their loss and send them all our love. All right, that's it. I made it, almost.
Tracy, you don't have to apologize. The snivels, you're going to have some more of them, and they're okay. It's angel tears. and is expected. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughts. And now Judy Kirkpatrick Youngs. Miss Jude.
Good afternoon. My name is Judy Kirkpatrick Youngs, and I am Billy's cousin. But from here on, I'm going to refer to him as Eddie, because to our family, to the Kirkpatrick family, he was always Eddie. His daddy was Billy, Uncle Billy. He was Eddie. As evidence from the last 3 weeks of his life, Eddie was a fighter, usually in a good way, other times maybe not so much, if you know what I mean. But he was born into a family of public servants, and in death, he leaves a legacy of service, commitment, compassion, and sometimes tough love for those he deemed who needed it. Whether on the tough love end of his love or the other end, we've all been touched by Eddie during his too short 68 years on earth. And although he could be firm and fierce, no matter what, he was always fair. There are a lot of us Kirkpatricks, including Eddie's mother, our Aunt Cynthia, who was the second youngest of the 5 sisters. Altogether, there were 12 brothers and sisters, 11 who lived to adulthood. Those 11 all married and had families, yet every one of them stayed within about a 30-mile radius of where Grandma and Grandpa lived in Kennedale. Grandma and Grandpa's house was always our Sunday gathering place. It was where after church we would all gather in their tiny little house for a potluck lunch. Boy, those were good lunches, best lunches ever. We cousins would all play together outside without a care in the world. That's where we had Easter egg hunts, celebrated birthdays and special occasions, and generally learned what it meant to be family. Eddie was my little cousin, but I always looked up to him. I looked to him for advice, for friendship, for hugs, always for a laugh, and of course, anything law enforcement related. The Kirkpatrick legacy in public service and law enforcement is what legends are made of. And there's little doubt that Eddie was destined to be a police officer and a legend. Our Uncle Bill, known to most of you as Chief B.J. Kirkpatrick, proudly served the city of Fort Worth for 36 plus years before retiring in 1993 as Executive Deputy Chief of Police. He also served as Chief of Security for the stock show for 14 years. Our Uncle Tom Kirkpatrick served the citizens of Cleburne from 1950 to 1982, serving in the department's top position as Chief of Police from 1957 to 1971, then as Assistant Chief and Commander of the Uniform Division from 1971 to 1982. My dad, L.B. Kirkpatrick, who is known as Uncle B to the cousins, proudly served the Dallas Police Department for his entire career, which spanned from 1955 to 1974. My brother, Gary Kirkpatrick, followed in our dad's footsteps, serving the Dallas Police Department for 38 years, 20 years as a homicide detective, and later as commander of the Special Investigations Unit, before retiring in 2010. W.C. Kirkpatrick, our Uncle Speedy, who's here with us today, also began his career with the Fort Worth Police Department, serving from 1962 to 1966, before taking on the position of manager of the plant security for Bell Helicopter, where he retired in 2002. Several other cousins and relatives have served and continue the family legacy of service, as police officers, firefighters, paramedics, armed forces, nurses, and other frontline positions, and we are proud of every single one of them. So as you might imagine, with such a large family, our family has stories, lots of stories. So I've been asked to share a few of those stories with you today. From our cousin Brenda, she says, I lost not only a cousin, but a friend. Billy Edward Samuel Jr., known as Billy to some and Eddie to others, but he'll always be Eddie to me. Even though he was a few years younger than me and he was a boy, we grew up together and we were close. We were Kirkpatricks, and Kirkpatricks were and are close. Growing up, Eddie and his two younger brothers were, to say, a little mischievous, maybe rambunctious, or as my mother would have said, in a good way, as wild as the West Texas wind. But I loved them dearly, and I especially loved when they came to our house for a few hours while waiting for Uncle Billy to get off work. As a kid, he had great birthday parties. I still have my 3 little kittens who lost their mittens, little golden book from one of his birthday parties. And I remember when slip and slides first came out. They were a new thing, and they were a hit because back then nobody had a swimming pool. And it was my bathing suit that ripped the new slip and slide. Remember, this is cousin Brenda, not me, okay? Place the blame on her. It ripped the new slip and slide that his dad had just brought home, and I'm pretty sure that's one time cousin Eddie probably didn't really like me a whole lot. Who would have ever thought, though not surprising, that Eddie would follow in 4 of our Kirkpatrick uncle's footsteps to become a police officer, a Fort Worth police officer, and a darn good one. He worked security at the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show for many years, as well as working Chisholm Trail and Pioneer Days in the stockyards. And he always made sure when the Fab 4, that's 4 of us girl cousins, when we were going to be at the stock show, he always made sure we had a good place to park. He took us behind the scenes, and among other things, he let us use a restroom that really wasn't open to the public. So, you know, it's the little things that count. And he always acted like he really didn't mind spending time with us, whether it was for 10 minutes or an hour or so. He was loved by all, and he loved his Kirkpatrick and Samuel family as well as his work family. COVID is real. COVID is not picky who it chooses. COVID doesn't care who it chooses to take. COVID took one of the best, and he will be missed by many. Rest in peace, my cousin, my friend, Eddie. Brenda's daughter, Stacy, said, I don't really have a story about Eddie, but I found myself saying over the last couple of weeks when I tell people about him that my mom has a lot of cousins, and we do. And I have my favorites, and Eddie was definitely one of them. I think we all agree that definitely Eddie was one of the favorite cousins. From Cousin Kenneth, and for those of you who know Kenneth Ray, our cousin Kenneth Ray, this will be no surprise to you. Many years ago, Eddie was working in Forest Park, moving some traffic barriers for an upcoming race. He did not recognize me as I stopped about 50 feet away, rolled down my window and screamed, "Hey, you SOB, move it!" As he turned toward me, his face turned bright red, and he started walking toward me with his hand on his gun until he got to the truck and started laughing. He looked at me and he said, "That's a good way to get shot, cuz." Cousin Penny says, Eddie was always like a big brother to me, and he was always there when I needed him. We had so much fun on summer vacations with him and Sue. especially our trip to Colorado. He drove us up the mountains in a Jeep we rented, and he was fearless. I, on the other hand, was as scared as I could be. I have great memories of him and was so very blessed to have him in my life. Uncle Speedy says Eddie loved his family and his profession. He will be missed by all who knew him and loved him. I'm thankful for all the memories. He will be missed by a lot of people. He was a good man. I was always proud of him and the way he handled difficult situations. Rest in peace, Eddie. Love you. Cousin Denny says, Eddie was a good man and a professional police officer in every way. He will be missed by all of us, but he is in heaven with his heavenly family where there is no sickness. Love you, cuz. As for me, I have a lot of memories growing up with Eddie and my brother that were only 4 months apart in age, and in many ways they were a lot alike. One thing is for sure, but they both loved their family and their profession. They loved their law enforcement families. I remember once, and this has been quite a while back, going to Billy Bob's for a concert with Eddie. As we left the concert and walked through the parking lot, he looked at me and said, you know, Judy, for a Kirkpatrick, you sure are prissy. I never was much of a hellraiser, still not, but he was okay with that, and he routinely told me how proud he was of the work I'm doing with A Wish with Wings and the children we serve. In a text message earlier last fall, Eddie and I were discussing the likelihood of the stock show being held this year. We all know how much he loved the stock show and rodeo. He said, I really hope we'll have the stock show. Heck, those kids have purchased and are preparing their animals for show and auction. I'll be very sad if they can't show their animals in Fort Worth this year. Heck, that's what the stock show is all about. It's about the kids, the animals, and education. Then he went on to say, oh, and the auction dollars, of course. Then he said, hopefully, after a vaccine, the world will get back to what we call normal. Everyone is sure hoping so. My last message from Eddie was on Christmas Eve, when I texted to ask him if he needed me to bring anything to the hospital as I was on my way into Fort Worth. No thanks, sweetheart. I got the gift bag from your office. Thank you very much. I love you so much. And that seems like a fitting way to end my remarks. He loved us all so much. We are comforted knowing that Eddie has been welcomed to his heavenly home by so many of his Kirkpatrick family and Samuel family who went before him. And our family is forever grateful for your prayers and words of comfort during this time, not only for Sue and Tracy and James, but for the extended family as well. Thank you so much. And Fort Worth police officers, you are amazing. Thank you for everything.
I'm getting more inside family history behind the curtain than we could ever put in print. Cousin time, as I welcome Leanne Samuel Stevens.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leanne Samuel Stevens, and on behalf of the Samuel family, I would like to begin by thanking everyone that is here. Thank you. With us today, and to all those who are watching from home with our loved ones. I am honored to be sharing these memories with you. A poem called The Dash by Linda Ellis and Mac Anderson inspired me to think of Billy's dash. These are a few verses from the poem. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from beginning to end. He noted that first came the date of his birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time he spent alive on earth, and how only those who loved him know what that little line is worth. Here's what Billy's dash means to us. Billy was always the organizer, the one always there for you when you needed him, and the mentor to so many of us. Here are a few highlights in Billy's dash. As kids, Billy and all of his aunts, uncles, and cousins would go to Mamaw and Papaw's house for Sunday lunch. They loved to eat their fried chicken and hang out together. Papaw Samuel owned a dairy farm in Kennedale, Texas. This is where all the cousins learned how to milk a cow. The family called him Eddie growing up because it was short for his middle name, Edward, which was named after his grandfather. Still today, there are a few who still refer to him as Cousin Eddie. As a young girl, I remember Billy and his dad, Uncle Bill, going to Alvarado Lake to go fishing. Billy thought it was funny to put worms on all of us. He would sit back and just watch our reactions and laugh about it. Billy loved fishing. There were so many fishing trips with family and friends to Craig's Inland Charters in Barretera, Louisiana. James loved going fishing with his dad and has great memories for these trips. This was typically a guys-only trip, so there are lots of fun memories and stories out there, but apparently what happens when you go fishing stays fishing. Billy was the organizer and the planner for many different trips. He loved to get groups together and all stay at the Auslander in Red River, New Mexico. He planned trips in December and in the summer months. In the summers, they would always go four-wheeling and play in the mountains. There was one four-wheeling adventure in particular when they had rented four-wheelers for the day. Billy was worried about having to pay more money for going over their rental time. Even though it was because Sue had had a bad wipeout, he kept telling her to hurry up because they had to be back in 30 minutes or he was going to have to pay that extra fee. Tracy remembers the first time she got to pick out her first four-wheeler. It was red and white, and she thought it was the coolest thing on the planet. James got his four-wheeler for Christmas. He was so happy and he cried and gave his dad the biggest hug. Tracy remembers a time when she was about 13, when her dad let her drive the truck in the mountains. About that time, a cinnamon bear ran across the front of the truck and she hit it. It was a very scary time. In the winter months, even though Billy didn't ski, he looked forward to all of us coming off the mountain at the end of the day. He always had a great big fire going in the fireplace where we would gather for dinner, drinks, stories, and games. It was always a great time telling stories about our day on the mountain. On one of the trips, we were traveling back home. We had a blowout in the motorhome on I-40 just outside of Amarillo. The entire bottom compartment was all over I-40. Apparently, that's where we stored all the Coors Light cans and the crock pot that survived without a scratch. We will never forget him running up and down the freeway picking up all of those cans. Boy, was that a sight to see. Billy was always there to help others, and he would never leave anyone stranded on the side of the road. While in Red River, he loved to go to the casinos in Taos, but once he got there, he would never take a dime out of his own pocket. He enjoyed watching everyone else spend their money, hang out, and have a good time. Billy loved taking family trips in their motorhome and jeeping all over. He loved the outdoors and going fishing, hunting, and camping. They spent lots of hours on the road, traveling to different places. James loved to go on hunting trips with his dad. He especially remembers the bird hunting trips to South Dakota and to Kansas. Another memorable trip was a trip to New York. Billy was there for a Texpers work event, and the family got to tag along. Tracy remembers him coming in late after they were asleep, drunk as a skunk. He was waving his umbrella around like a sword, yelling, "On guard!" And then he petted her face and told her how much he loved her. Billy was a great mentor to so many of us. While I was going to Texas Wesleyan, I loved the days we could go on ride-alongs with him for some criminal justice hours. We would stop by the Nashville station and say hi, bring him lunch, or just hang out and chat for a little while. He was so proud of the day that Tracy and Vance got married. For those of you who were there, you will probably remember his extremely long Father of the Bride speech. And after Hadley was born, Billy would pick Tracy up every day since she couldn't drive, since Vance and Sue were both working. It was just Pops, Tracy, and Hadley. Neither of them had a clue about taking care of a newborn, but they figured it out. Billy supported all of the kids in their sports activities. He would come out to basketball, volleyball, baseball, and softball games and cheer them on. One of Tracy's memories was a volleyball tournament that she had in Frisco. They got all the way up there before she realized she had left her shoes at home. He dropped her off at the tournament and drove all the way back to Joshua to get her shoes and bring them back to her. In hindsight, she sees he was too cheap to just go out and buy another pair of shoes. Recently, Billy has been cutting out Money magazine articles and giving them to Tracy because he thought she could learn something from them, because he was always trying to save a dime. Billy was so proud of Tracy when she started her coaching career. He told her that that is exactly what she is meant to do. Pops loved going to all sporting events to support Kinley, Vance Jr., Hadley, and all other nieces and nephews. Lastly, were rodeo days. This place will not be the same without him here running the show. Rodeo days were the best. You could always count on seeing him, getting a big hug, and hanging out for a few photos before enjoying your day at the rodeo. Billy has impacted all of us in so many ways. Therefore, I can stand proud today to say the little line from beginning to end, Billy's dash, shows he is a true hero and has lived a great legacy.
We get through today, I'm not going to be sure, do I call him Billy, call him Uncle Billy, Eddie, Officer Samuel. This man and this extended family had a lot of names, but if you haven't figured it out, his family was his dedication. To the next gentleman who he worked with, served with, and I'm sure negotiated with more than one time, the former mayor of our beloved city, Fort Worth, Mr. Mike Moncrief. Thank you, sir.
Bob, thank you very much. Well, I came prepared to tell a few stories, but my solo cup's empty, so maybe I better just stick to the script. One quick observation. Some time ago, someone asked me, "How you doing, Mike?" And my response was, "Blessed. How are you?" And he kind of looked at me funny, and he said, "I think I'm blessed too." Well, I submit that every single one of us here today and in the extended audience online who had the opportunity to meet or work with Billy, in whatever capacity that might have been, is equally blessed. So God bless all of you. Rosie and I, along with our son Troy, are honored to join all of you here today, the families that are here today, to be here with Sue and the family, the Fort Worth family, and of course, the Stock Show family, as well as other friends of Billy. And as I look around this room, especially at our Stock Show friends, while there will be stories told today, there's probably going to be a lot more that aren't, and probably for good reason. Sue was concerned that because of COVID, we wouldn't be able to give Billy a proper send-off. Well, I think when you arrived today and you saw Mounted, you saw our motor officers, you see all the officers that are here with us today, I think we're sending him off in a way he would be mighty proud of. Mighty proud of. It took a lot of work from a lot of folks who put a lot of hours in to make this happen, in spite of COVID. Even Will Rogers Tower turned blue in memory of this great man, and what a fitting tribute that was. Wasn't that cool? Well, while Billy leaves us far too early, we all have memories of times that we had together, and I encourage everyone, especially Sue and James and Tracy, to remember the good times, the fun times, yes, even the mischievous times, and knowing Billy, there were plenty of them. Don't think about the sad days. Don't think about these last days. And we pray your tears will gradually become smiles and eventually laughter while recalling the good times with Billy. To James and Tracy, you have every reason to be proud of your father and for what he did for this community. He was a fine police officer who protected all of us every day. He was a part of the best police department in the country. And I say that with confidence, I say that with experience, and I still say it with a great deal of pride. He was a man with a big heart who loved you very much. And to the grandkids, you should be mighty proud of Pops. Mighty proud of Pops. To say Billy was a unique individual is a gross understatement. We appreciate the 34 years that he gave to serve the people of this great city. You know, Billy takes me back in history, and Bob mentioned that we might have done a little negotiating together. Well, that too is a gross understatement. He spent a lot of time in my office while I was in the Senate, and he was a member of the POA board. And let me tell you, he was one hell of a lobbyist. To his credit and to the boards, they usually brought sound legislative proposals requesting my support, and I usually did, sometimes with a little encouragement. I call them drive-bys. I also had the privilege, I thought I was done with Billy, but I had the privilege of working with him when I was mayor. He's still there. And during that time, while we didn't always agree on everything, and I'm sure John and Rick will agree that there was never any doubt about how Billy felt about an issue. And when you ask him a question, he never looked down at the floor when he gave you an answer. He'd look you directly in the eye and tell you not only how he felt, but why, or why not. And quite frankly, you know, I just don't think we have enough of that these days. Just saying. When I was working with Billy, he was known as the unofficial mechanic of Fort Worth PD. If you wanted something done in the department, you called Billy to get it done. You didn't always ask him how he did it, but you called him to get it done. And it wasn't only the citizens or elected officials that made calls to him about getting something done. It was other officers too. While he wasn't part of command, he was a master mechanic of this department. He cared deeply about his fellow officers. And it wasn't like Billy to show a lot of emotion. He always had kind of a steady hand on the wheel. He did his homework, and he was well grounded. I think that's why his fellow officers trusted him. And trust in the police department is a big deal. Trust has to be earned, can't be given. You got to earn it, and he did. Billy loved the stock show, that's certainly no secret, and he was a faithful guardian of the infamous horseshoe, the area out in front of the Coliseum. He and he alone determined who got to park there. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about? And more importantly, who did not. Well, let's just say there was one occasion when I did not get to park there. And as Forrest Gump would say, and that's all I'm going to say about that. As was mentioned earlier, he loved the kids at the stock show. He loved seeing them arrive on the grounds all bright-eyed and eager. He enjoyed seeing them work with their animals, and often, as was said earlier, his statement was this, and I quote, "Without the kids and their stock, there wouldn't be a stock show," unquote. And he's right. Billy never ceased to be amazed by how the Stock Show Syndicate volunteer group managed to raise so much money, but he was so thrilled when he knew it went all to the kids. Most of all, Billy loved meeting new people there, ag teachers, the workers from all over the stock show grounds, contestants, everyone. And he'd say the same thing about them, whether it was the Ladies Junior League, the Cash Scramble group, the arena directors, and everyone who helped with the show each year. He loved working with them all. As I said, Billy left too soon, but I think we will always agree, and we will all agree, he is certainly in a much better place than we find ourselves right now. No doubt, the good Lord is providing him a deer blind with trophy buck to look at all day long. In closing today, Sue, what I do know is that the Fort Worth police family will do what it always does when it loses one of their own. They will enfold you under their wing. They will keep a close eye on you and protect you. And they will never, I repeat, never forget their fellow officer. Rest in peace, my friend. And Billy, please save me a spot in the horseshoe. God bless you all and be safe.
No, Mayor, I've always been able to park in the horseshoe. Before you were mayor, while you were mayor, after you were mayor, with the Kirkpatricks, the Samuels. I love parking in the horseshoe. Sorry. I very seldom ever get to follow you in public. To your red Solo cup. I salute you, sir. You know, sometimes, and Billy would do this with that grin I was talking about, he'd take his shot. And when you would want or expect, you know, something verbal, it was them little beady eyes and little tight smile, and he'd give it to you. And he could melt you as well as build you up. And the Beatles, how fitting was that? Yeah, most of us of the age remember that and how it works. That's pretty cool. Open mic time. If you're comfortable, I have one here, one over here, and one on the back. And you just want to say a couple of words. If you'd like to speak, introduce yourself or not, through the mask, without the mask, I invite you. Anyone? If you'd like to. I see someone coming. Awesome.
Thank you, Bob.
Good evening, sir.
Is Mike on?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I get to follow you one more time. My name's Gary Ray. I'm a 34-year member of the Fort Worth Stock Show Syndicate. I was not at the first, the 1980 Sell of Champions when Don Weeks and a handful of businessmen walked on the floor, but I know Billy and Bob Watt were. And I've often wondered what they thought about a group of guys showing up after drinking breakfast for 2 hours and spending a lot of money on steers to help the kids. I don't need to know what they said. I figured they approved of it because we've done it for the last 40 years. Billy was always a part of it. For 40 years, he was always there watching us, helping us, keeping an eye on us, keeping some of us out of trouble. He was a friend to a lot of the syndicate members. When we heard of his death, emails started going around, and come to find out we had several members that didn't know Billy. My comment back to him was, you can bet he knew you because you're a member of the Fort Worth Stock Show Syndicate. He always kept up with the syndicate guys. He was a great friend to have back when the years of Mr. Leggett and Mr. McMillan got to where they couldn't go from the backstage club to the cell barn. He made sure they got there. In the last 15 years, he's made sure that Don Weeks, Frank Neve, when he was alive, and Scott Corpening could get from our breakfast to the barn, to the sales arena, and back to their vehicles. He was always there to help us anytime we needed him. He was our guardian angel. And for the last 15 years, I guess, Officer Bonnie and I and Billy have stood on the wall to watch the Grand Champion show. He will be missed. He will always be on that wall. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And by the way, there's nothing wrong in Tarrant County or the city of Fort Worth with adult libation on sale day at breakfast. It's okay.
My name is Jim Smith. I'm from San Antonio. And first of all, I want to thank Sue for sharing her husband with folks like me from San Antonio. And I just want to repeat what Rick said. You know, I met Billy probably looking just like that about 11 years ago at one of my first conferences. as a brand new trustee, and you'd have thought we'd have been brothers and friends for many, many years, and he was a true mentor. And he has done so much to enhance the quality of life for guys like me, all the young officers in Fort Worth, San Antonio. We have officers from Houston here today, from Austin. What he did way back in the day to make sure we have those quality of life issues, it's immeasurable, the amount of lives he's touched, not just here in Fort Worth, but throughout the state of Texas and throughout the United States. He did things the right way. Billy was a great man, but as we all know in here, he was one of the good guys, one of the good guys. And boy, do I miss those days when I first met him and Lance together. Batman and Robin, y'all can determine which one was which. But I will tell you, Billy's here, he's seeing us, he's watching us. And we promise tonight, Billy, we're gonna have a toast or two or three or four. We're not gonna get any umbrellas out. I never heard that story before. Only thing is, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to hear about that story about the parking, but I'm gonna have to disagree with you too from San Antonio. I'm kind of biased. I think we have one of the best departments, but we'll just say it's a tie. Now, you guys got a great department, great people, but that's because of great leadership and from men like Billy, one of the good guys.
Officer, thank you for coming all the way. Whoever's here from Houston and any other police departments around our great state of Texas. And thank you for your service, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm Jim Tate. I was a firefighter here for 31 years. I was on the union board for the Firefighters Association for 25 years and worked closely with Billy during all those years. Early years were with Billy and with John Kerr and Mayor Mike, Senator Mike, and then Mayor Mike. But Billy was a true friend, and you can see from this row of firefighters right here that he had friends all across town. We all loved him.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, and to all of you for your service. Anyone else?
I'm Norman Miner. I went to school with Billy, high school. And that horseshoe deal, I'd always come up here and talk to those guys, said, hey, Norman Miner, I went to school with Billy. Oh, sure, get a parking spot. As it turned out, it was an ice storm. I pulled up there in the front, two officers sitting in the van. I turned my truck off, it's a diesel. I said, I'm a friend of Billy, went to school with him, can I get a parking spot? No problem. Turned my key over, my truck wouldn't start. I had jumper cables, they jumped me off. Still ice on my hood. I get my hand caught, the hood comes down on my hand, and I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness gracious. I said, pardon me, officers, could you get in my truck and open up my hood for me? Sure, no problem. I walk inside, Billy's in there crying. He's laughing so hard. He said, Miner, you the only one I know could come up here and get your hand caught in your hood. But I did get to park on the horseshoe.
Today will be a memorable memory for many minds, and along with dedication, in a few other words, now legend, great legend that he is, not was, the next word will be horseshoe. Anyone else? Before we close today, I'd like to invite our color guard, honor guard, in the presentation of this flag. We've got one more.
I'm trying. Yeah, that's what scares me. I'll keep the mask on if you can hear me and understand me. My name is Mike Miller. I met Billy when I was deputy sheriff in '77, came to Fort Worth in '79, and we've been friends since '77. Now, I've got a lot of Billyism to say, but I choose not to. You're welcome, believe me. I will tell you one that is probably dear to my heart. We worked Pioneer Days, Chisholm Trail, and everything. And they had what they called the Civil War of the stockyards, where East and West were going to have different festivals. Well, Billy said, "Hey, Mike, why don't you go ahead and handle the West Exchange side, and you work for Carol Becker?" I go, "Well, I can't say what I said." I said, I'll do it. And so I said, "You know what you're doing is you're just selling me like a piece of meat to them." He goes, "Yeah, pretty much." Well, 22 years later, I've been married to Carol Becker. And that was probably the best thing Billy ever did to me. But he told me one day, he said, "Now, Mike, I told you to go work for her. I didn't say you had to marry her." With that as a typical Billyism, and thank you, Billy.
Thank you, Mike. That's a great story. That is a great story. Anyone else? If I might re-invite the honor guard and the presentation of our flag. If you'd like to stand. Gentlemen, remove cover. Thank you. With that presentation completed, what do you say we remain standing? For those of you been around me for the last 40 years around here, what a blessing. Michael, you said it, blessed. Blessed by Billy, blessed by this department, blessed by the firemen that are here today, and the men and women of both of these departments, blessed by this city, and blessed by Billy. There's a lot of you who will feel bad, horrible. You'll feel cheated that you didn't get to say, "See you, Billy, goodbye." You didn't get to tell him a Billyism. You didn't get to tell him a story. When Mr. Barnes called me and said, "We have a brother who needs prayer," and Brad Barnes was serious. And then he followed it with a text. Of course, I said, "Who?" And he told me. And that's all it took. We already had Red Stiegel, another brother to this organization, on a prayer list at Greenwood Baptist Church and other places, other cities, other churches, other homes, and of all denomination. And I'm going to be honest with you. You know, I'm big on Jesus. I'm big on prayer. I'm big on faith. And I thought to myself, it's Billy. Lord, send your prayers. He'll strengthen. He'll fight. He'll do it quietly. He'll be fine. Dang it. Did our prayers fail? No. Because I do believe that those prayers gave God a little edge on checking him out. He knew every hair on his head, knew everything about him, from conception to the moment he took his last breath. And he said, I need a friend, a father, a grandfather, an officer, a Texan, and a servant on my team in my police force. And he said, Billy, guess what? I'm making you the chief. Come with me. And he went. Okay. Does that help us as mortals, waiting for our turn, and not being able to say goodbye, not being able to reconnect? Many of you have seen me, heard me do this before. And if you're comfortable with an open hand or two beside you, in front of you, or above you, when they put Jesus on the cross, his hands were open. His feet were crossed. His head was bowed beneath a crown of thorns. His hands were open and will be seen that way of all of us forever for one reason. The connection opportunity for him to his Father, to all of us, is the Holy Spirit. Believe or not, join or not, but don't perish without faith that your ability to communicate travels from your open hands, above you, beside you, or before you. And that Holy Spirit will allow you to reconnect with Billy Samuel, the father, the policeman, the leader, the legend. I ask you, here now, on the way home, when you get home, with your family or in private, reconnect, and with others as well. It's simple, it's free, you'll not get a bill in the mail. And with that, I say amen. Y'all cool? Hands raised for one thing and say it loud. Billy, we love you. For those of you that understand, and if you have a copy, I'm a big believer in a wish with wings. I'm a big believer, of course, in the stock show with our kids in the calf scramble. You know that Billy was, is, and always will be. If you've never been able to or would like to contribute, I highly suggest that you follow in suit with what he and his family do. Sue, Mom, we love you. And with that, I ain't going to say goodbye. I'll just say, I'll see you in 2022. And Billy will be in that hallway. He will be behind me, and he'll be here with us. Ta-ta, Fort Worth. He's a champion. That was Officer Jason Bach. Our friend happens to be my neighbor, and Billy's friend too. And that concludes our afternoon. Good day, everyone. Good day.